Hello and welcome to the Get Sustainable show produced by ESBN in partnership with Green Europe Today and Livestream Studio. Today we welcome Paweł Żuczek, Director at REINO Partners, which is part of the REINO Capital Group, a Polish investment and real estate holding company listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. Paweł, glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here today.
Paweł, why don't we start off with a short introduction to REINO Partners in connection with your ESG activities? I believe your track record convinced some key investors recently in the field to partner with you, and also were invited. And you also invited to speak at a UN conference recently to showcase your achievements in implementing sustainable development goals within the real estate sector. So, can you perhaps tell us a bit more about these initiatives?
Yeah, sure. We've been involved in ESG initiatives for forever, like since REINO was created. So I think saying that it's within our DNA perfectly reflects the point. And we've been dealing with these aspects when it was called green building solutions, then sustainable development, CSR at some point, now ESG. Whatever we call it, our goal was always the same: to create a sustainable and green asset manager. And so a few years ago, we started a program that we called REINO Without Barriers. And the idea is to certify all our office buildings under Building Without Barriers certificate by Fundacja Integracja. And in 2020, one of our buildings, Malta House, has won the annual competition Accessibility Leader.
Oh, brilliant, okay.
And then for another perspective, the same building, Malta House, is the only building in Poland to own double LEED Platinum certification. And we really believe in certification for existing buildings. For example, Kapelanka 42B since 2018 holds the highest LEED EBON score in Poland. So what we do is that when we take over the assets, we transfer them to be more sustainable, more efficient, and as a result, ESG ready. And I think the key aspect here is that our track record, our understanding of ESG, as you said, is attracting investors. And a perfect example here is Gromino, who based its decision on investing with us in Poland largely on our approach to sustainability, which they asked us to pitch, and our track record. And so within a year, we've built a logistic portfolio of 350,000 square meters, and it's still growing. Those are just few examples, but I think they perfectly reflect our attitude to ESG. And probably that's one of the reasons why we're invited to the conference in Brussels, which you mentioned, organized by United Nations, European Parliament, and IFMA, to present how REINO Group implements sustainable development goals. And this will be a kind of example on how real estate market implements SDGs. Well,
congratulations. Seems like very impressive work that you've been doing. And as you say, often efficiency goes hand in hand with meeting sustainability goals because of the energy optimization mainly. Now, each business adopts a slightly different approach to their ESG strategy. This is especially important in the context of the new taxonomy system introduced, and as a consequence, new criteria set by financial institutions. So what should we expect these new criteria to be, and what is your approach to the subject of ESG, where the term is still open to individual interpretation?
Yes, definitely each company has a different approach, and I think it's worth mentioning here that our approach is also slightly different. And that's because the sequence of activities in our case is probably different to what others do. And that's because, as I said, we are involved in these initiatives for quite a long time already. And now we are kind of, putting this into words, so creating procedures. So I find it more like arranging ourselves than creating something from scratch. But yes, the approach is different, and from what we see, it mainly focuses on environmental aspects, whereas these S and G aspects are a bit ignored. And I personally believe, even though I'm a technical person, I believe that you cannot base all your ESG strategy on green building certificates only. Especially because those certificates, usually they are certificates for new construction. And the company is trying to convince you that the certificate for new construction means that this building will be sustainable in the future, whereas it will not be. It's like, they're trying to convince you that having this certificate means that it will be efficient, the building will be efficient. It's like almost like a new iPhone, amazing. No, it's not, because it's based on the energy performance of the building is based on computer simulations. And I sincerely doubt that someone puts in those simulations all those construction defects that come out later. like holes in the walls or missing insulation. And we did a number of this certification in REINO. We really believe that this is the way to show whether the building is sustainable or not.
So refreshing the certification?
No, it's like separate certification.
Okay.
I mean, that's also the problem, because you don't have to refresh the certificate for new building, new construction building, which probably is a kind of mistake. But on the other hand, it tells you that the construction process was sustainable, not the building itself.
Or the building is ready to become sustainable.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's a very important point that you've raised, that it's important to check against key milestones if what was delivered is what is actually happening.
Yes, exactly. And we did a number of the certification, and believe me, there are a lot of discrepancies between what investors declared and then what actually there is. That's why we believe in these certifications for existing buildings. But the problem probably today is that ESG is something undefined. So I really believe that both taxonomy and financing institutions' requirements will be a game changer, because they will allow us to compare in black and white, to see in black and white whether this building is sustainable or not, without greenwashing, no ESG washing. So to put it into context, this green building certificate, for example, will not be a piece of paper, it will have an actual value. Yeah,
there's a lot of activity in this area and a lot of changes happening, so it's important to get ready for them. Moving on to another area of interest, let's talk about responsible investments in its full sense. So what policies and procedures do you have in place to ensure high environmental and social standards in the projects available to your clients? Do investors these days demand more in terms of sustainable credentials of a given project, or is this simply another box-ticking exercise for them? You mentioned before about the investors, the external investors that believed in your business because of these credentials.
That's right, and I think it's pretty obvious today that the investors, that those aspects for the investors are extremely important, especially for foreign investors, because where ESG initiatives were implemented much earlier than in Poland. And as you said, we see it when we're talking with our investors, with REINO or with Partners Group. And I must say we are really happy to work with the investors who share our ambitions and understanding of ESG. Because at some point there is a decision to be made whether you shall invest this money, let's say, in a greater good, or to spend this money on something else.
Well, it's against short-term goals rather than long-term growth and development, and actually sustainable development, because there is a limit on what our planet can take.
That's right, and also I feel that investors, they also feel pressure for their stakeholders to invest in sustainable businesses.
But individuals are also looking at funds that have these green credentials, and they are more aware and their decisions are more green-oriented. So that in extent drives these changes in the whole investment landscape.
That's right, and then these individuals, those are tenants, and this is another aspect of this story, because the tenants who have contracts with different organizations, which sometimes impose certain restrictions on those companies, like for example decarbonization, and well, to keep that contract they have to obey those regulations, and what happens is that all those restrictions are directly transferred to the tenants, to the landlord. And then if the landlord is not prepared, well, he's at the end of the race.
As you're, I'm sure, well aware, from next year, public companies noted on the stock exchange will that meet a certain criteria will have to publish ESG reports, and from 2026, all public companies will be required to do so. So, how is REINO Capital Group preparing for this change?
In our everyday work, like as an asset manager or investment manager, I think we're always excelling the standards. So, to be honest, for us, being a public company listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange does not change much in our everyday routine. But we definitely intensified our work around ESG procedures and the non-financial reporting. We're working with external consultants to be prepared for with both ESG strategy and non-financial reporting already for 2022, even though it's not formally required yet. And we're also working with our key stakeholders to first raise their awareness, but also to explain them our approach to sustainability so that we are sure we are going in the same direction.
Yeah, it's interesting how the financial reports that need to be are required to be published are very similar to what will happen in terms of sustainability reports or ESG reports. There are a lot of similarities between them.
Yeah, the good thing is that there will be a simple story. It's like no ESG washing. All the information, I hope, will be validated and reliable,
transparent and clear. Finally, I'd like to cover an important subject I haven't spoken much about yet. All indications are clear that we are to expect challenges in terms of meeting our energy needs in the near future. And at least we should be preparing for higher costs. How can asset managers help address these issues? Can you share some examples of the work you're currently doing in this field?
Yeah, that's probably the best question you can ask nowadays.
Right at the end.
But there's a lot of aspects.
Yes.
Firstly, as you said, the energy price is crazy.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's not profitable anymore to contract energy for large portfolios because energy providers cannot offer you a good price for that huge volume of energy. So that's the first change. It used to be profitable, looks like it's not anymore. What we are looking at is sourcing energy from renewable sources of energy in two models, in energy as a service or on-site off-grid. But then we have to remember that photovoltaics farms, they don't produce energy constantly and permanently, so additional agreement for balancing agreement has to be secured. And then there is all this paperwork and obtaining a connection permit for a photovoltaic farm, especially big photovoltaic farm. It's a disaster, and these procedures, I don't want to go much into details, but they might look very strange. But we're also looking at another ideas like co-investing in energy storage. We are using our relations here with companies from abroad that want to invest in Central and Eastern Europe. We are also using our investors' connections, and we are meeting with different startups. And I must say, some ideas about energy generation on site, they're really fascinating, and I hope we will be able to implement some of those in our portfolios.
I think we're right at the edge of an energy revolution, especially in Eastern Europe, where we're going to be moving away very quickly from fossil fuels. Thank you very much, Paweł, for the fascinating conversation today. Really glad we managed to get hold of you. So if you have any questions concerning investments, asset management or real estate projects, please send them over to us by direct message on social media or by email at contact@greeneuropetoday.com, and we'll be happy to send them over to Paweł for you. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up to date with all our latest releases, and get in touch if you'd like to appear on one of our shows. Thank you very much for watching today. See you again next week. Goodbye.